The year was 2012. London, the Olympics. Yes, Olympics. The air was thick with anticipation, billions of pounds spent, years of planning. The world's greatest athletes had gathered, ready to sprint, jump and throw things really, really far. Everyone was glued to their screens, waiting for superhuman feats, for records to be shattered, for moments of pure, unadulterated sporting glory. You know the drill, flags waving, anthems playing, very serious people in very tight lycra. It was all going according to the very expensive, very elaborate plan. Or so we thought. Then, amidst the spectacle of perfectly sculpted humans and their incredible displays of speed and strength, something entirely unexpected happened. Something small, something slow, something slimy. Yes, folks, a snail. A common garden snail, if you can believe it, decided to make its Olympic debut. Right there, on the hallowed grounds of the Olympic Park, not in the synchronized swimming, thankfully. Though that would have been a sight. No, this ambitious gastropod chose the athletics track, the very track where legends were made. It was, to put it mildly, a curveball, a very, very slow curveball. The initial reaction from the commentators, bless their cotton socks, was one of utter bewilderment. You could almost hear their brains short-circuiting. And now, there appears to be... Is that a snail? Yes, it was a snail. Doing its best snail impression, which, as you know, mostly involves moving at a pace that makes glaciers look like Formula One cars. Was it a protest? A very subtle, very slow protest against the commercialization of sport? Or perhaps it had just got lost on its way to a particularly juicy lettuce leaf. The world waited. This wasn't in the brochure, was it? Come to the London Olympics, see Usain Bolt, see Jessica Ennis, and see... a snail! It was the ultimate underdog story before we even knew it was a story. No corporate sponsors, no fancy trainers. Obviously it's a snail. Just pure, unadulterated, slow-moving ambition. Or perhaps, as I said, just a very confused snail. Either way, this tiny creature, completely oblivious to the global sporting event unfolding around it, was about to steal the show. And it didn't even have to break a sweat, which for a snail is probably quite easy. At first there were chuckles, you know, the polite kind. Then, as the cameras, presumably with nothing better to do between heats, kept cutting back to our little friend, something shifted. People started to pay attention, real attention. Not just a fleeting glance, but proper, dedicated snail watching. In a stadium built for speed, the slowest thing imaginable was captivating the audience. The irony was delicious. So delicious, in fact, you could almost put it on a pizza. Don't actually do that, that's cruel, and probably not very tasty. The crowd in the stadium, thousands of them, began to point. Phones were whipped out. Suddenly, taking a picture of a snail on an Olympic track was the hottest ticket in town. Forget the javelin, forget the high jump for a moment. There was a snail on a mission, or at least a snail on the move. The collective human consciousness, usually focused on who crossed the finish line first, was now utterly transfixed by something that might not cross any line for several hours. It was a beautiful, baffling moment of shared human experience. The sports commentators, trained to describe lightning-fast finishes and complex gymnastic routines, found themselves in uncharted territory. Well, Bob, it seems our little competitor is making steady progress, about a millimetre every 5 minutes. Truly riveting stuff. They tried their best, adapting their usual high-octane delivery to the snail's somewhat more deliberate pace. It was a masterclass in improvisational sports broadcasting, focusing on the sheer tenacity of this tiny, shelled athlete. They probably deserved a medal just for keeping a straight face through it all. This snail, let's call him Shelley for argument's sake, wasn't built for speed. That much was clear. Its personal best was probably eventually. But it was moving. It had a direction. Maybe it was heading for the shade. Maybe it was trying to escape the roar of 80,000 people suddenly very interested in its travel plans. Whatever its motivation, Shelley was demonstrating a quiet determination that, in its own way, was as compelling as any sprint finish. The world was hooked on this tiny, slimy drama unfolding at a snail's pace. The journey of Shelley the snail was, by any measure, an epic. Each movement, a monumental effort. You could almost see the strain on its little snail face, if snails had expressive faces. Which they don't, but let's use our imaginations here. The sun beat down. The track was a vast red desert. For a creature of that size, it was like crossing a continent. The cheers of the crowd, initially for the human athletes, slowly started to include encouraging murmurs for our tenacious mollusk. It was a marathon, not a sprint in the truest sense of the word. People in the stands were genuinely invested. They weren't just laughing anymore, they were rooting for the snail. "Come on, Shelley, you can do it," they'd shout, probably confusing the actual athletes no end. This was grassroots support at its finest. No multi-million-dollar endorsement deals for Shelley, just the pure, unadulterated goodwill of thousands of strangers who had found a new, unlikely hero. This snail was teaching us all a lesson in perseverance, one tiny, slimy slide at a time. It was slow, it was arduous, it was magnificent. Then, in a moment of pure, unscripted genius, someone, a track official with a sense of humor perhaps, or a very enthusiastic spectator who'd snuck onto the track, don't do that by the way, drew a tiny finish line for the snail. Yes, a little chalk line, just a few inches from where Shelley was painstakingly making its way. This was it. The official, unofficial Snail Olympics. The tension was palpable, or as palpable as tension can be when watching something move that slowly. It was a beautiful gesture, a recognition of this creature's incredible, albeit accidental, journey. And then it happened. After what felt like several geological epochs, Shelley, our hero, crossed the improvised finish line. The crowd erupted, not with the polite applause reserved for a minor celebrity, but with a genuine, heartfelt roar of approval. A snail had just won an event at the Olympics, not by being fast, not by being strong, but by simply not giving up. It was absurd, it was hilarious, and it was, in its own strange way, profoundly moving. A tiny champion had been crowned in the most unexpected of circumstances. Unsurprisingly, the tale of Shelley the Olympic snail went viral faster than the snail itself could travel a centimetre. The internet, in its infinite wisdom, embraced this story with open arms and a barrage of memes. Hashtags like #OlympicSnail and #SnailOlympics trended worldwide. People shared photos, videos, and increasingly elaborate jokes. "That snail trained harder than I have for anything in my life," one person tweeted. Another quipped, "Still faster than my internet connection." The snail became an overnight global superstar, all without saying a single word, or moving very much. Nicknames abounded: the gastropod gold medalist Usain Snail, Shelley the rocket snail. The creativity was astonishing. People made fan art. Someone probably wrote a song about it. It was a moment of collective lightheartedness that the world apparently desperately needed. In the high-pressure environment of the Olympics, where every fraction of a second counts, the snail offered a moment of glorious, unhurried silliness. It reminded everyone that sports and life can also be about the wonderfully ridiculous. But why did this tiny creature's journey resonate so deeply with so many people? It wasn't just the humor, though there was plenty of that. It was the sheer, unadulterated persistence. Here was a creature facing an enormous, almost insurmountable task, crossing a giant, hot, noisy expanse, and it just kept going. It didn't complain, it didn't stop, it just put one part of its foot forward very, very slowly. It was a metaphor for perseverance, a tiny, slimy symbol of hope and determination in a world that often feels too fast and too demanding. Ultimately, the story of the Olympic snail transcended the initial joke. It became an inspiring fable for the modern age. It taught us that sometimes the most memorable victories aren't about being the fastest or the strongest. Sometimes it's about the quiet courage to keep moving forward, no matter how slow the progress, no matter how big the obstacles. The snail didn't win a gold medal, obviously, but it won the hearts of millions, proving that true inspiration can come from the most unexpected and slowest of sources. And that in itself is a pretty spectacular win.